listening to Championing Justice, a personal injury podcast, where our host, Darl Champion, discusses the ins and outs of running a personal injury law firm, interviews expert guests, and discusses start law issues. You can listen and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are streamed. You can also watch a video version of each episode on YouTube. Our channel is linked in the show notes. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Championing Justice podcast. I'm Darl Champion. Today I'm joined by Jim Christy. Jim is the president of Postali, and today is going to be talking about internet marketing for lawyers, but also we'll be talking about some other topics related to marketing. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you bet. Great to be here.
Did I get your title right? President of Postali?
That's correct, yeah.
Awesome. Tell us what Postali is and the work that y'all do.
Yeah, so we are a marketing agency for attorneys. We work with a lot of personal injury attorneys, but we also work with firms of really all sizes. We have a few corporate firms, we work with some solos, so it really ranges. And we do services that are really custom to what that firm needs. So a lot of people do engage with us for SEO, design work, kind of the more common things, but then we will do some strategy, we'll dabble a little bit in SEO. But I would say the digital website and ads are really the kind of our bread and butter.
Sure. So, and the way that we met was we started using Postali for website redesign and ongoing SEO back in 2020. So we used to be in Atlanta in the Vinings area. We were making a move to Marietta. We had just bought a building and we were looking at just kind of having a fresh start. So I was familiar with the work Postali had done a lot of research, and we reached out to y'all. So we've primarily been using Postali for that website redesign, for also launching our Georgia tort law website, which is where we put a lot of our attorney-focused content. We have things like case summaries, blog articles about substantive law, and videos about new cases that come out. But also, Postali's been doing our ongoing SEO. They've also done some PPC for us. Now, the name Postali, we were talking about that before we got started. Tell us where that name came from.
Yeah, so when we first started 13, 14 years ago, all we did was direct mail for attorneys. We looked at court records, filings, things like that, and we sent out targeted direct mail to people, speeding tickets, debt filings, things like that. And we did just that for a few years. I mean, even before we were a legitimate, fully formed business, we did that, just contract work for a few attorneys, and then we formed it. We had 25 to 30 attorneys that we'd mail out for, and a few of them said, hey, I'm getting quotes from Scorpion, or at the time, Scorpion was probably the biggest player in lawyer digital marketing. So we said, I think we can understand what's going on here and do some of that. So that was kind of our transition into more of the digital space. And now that mail company has completely spun off into something different. Like we still know the guys that work there, but we don't do any direct mail. So the name meant Italian. It was Italian for postal. And now we don't do anything that's related to the mail at all. So awesome. It's now it's just a nonsense word like Google.
Oh, but it has a great story.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. So tell us a little bit about all the different services that y'all do under that Postali umbrella.
Yep.
We've talked about organic SEO, and we'll talk about that in more detail in terms of what that is, because I think there's a kind of a misunderstanding among a lot of lawyers on what that really means. Yep. But kind of give us the full menu of services that y'all provide.
Yeah. I'll kind of start with we'll go through a chronology of what ideally we would do for every firm, because firms come to us at different stages in life, right? So, but at the beginning, what we'd really like to do with every firm is go through a branding exercise. We do branding for firms. What this often looks like for us is rebranding. We don't usually work with firms that just start out in law school and then they have to discover this vision. But that is something that I think we're really good at. From there, then from your brand, you can really start to understand visual assets and design. So we do logo creation, visual asset creation, website design. I personally like to break up website design from website strategy and building, because those are really two different things. A really exceptional designer can rescan a website and it can look so much different, but everything under the hood is exactly the same, and it may not perform better other than just aesthetically or from a perception standpoint. But we do a lot of really deep website architecture strategy, content development. So that's where kind of the under the hood website stuff comes in. And then once a site is live, we want to get people to it. So we do SEO, local service ads, paid social ads, Google ads, basically any type of advertising. And then we also do a lot of a la carte design and strategy work as well.
Perfect. Well, so this would be a great time for us to talk about the differences between SEO and paid search.
Yep.
So, and under the paid search umbrella, we've got different categories like
Yep.
PPC and LSAs, which are relatively new in the digital marketing landscape. So, just tell us, what is SEO and what does that mean?
Yeah, so SEO, it stands for search engine optimization, and what the work that an SEO does, it's interesting. A person can be an SEO and you can do SEO. It's kind of how it goes. But it's the work needed to get your site to rank higher in Google search.
Okay.
So I say Google, but just search engines, broader visibility.
Sure.
And
Google is the predominant search engine, right?
It is.
What are the statistics on how many?
It's
like 90%.
It's 80-85%. And then because you've got your DuckDuckGo, your Yahoo, your Bing. And
People still use Yahoo?
You'd be surprised. People still have AOL email addresses. I'm always just
I'll occasionally get a client with an AOL email address and instantly takes me back to college with like the dial-up internet.
Yeah, I'm just like, let me send you a AOL Instant Messenger.
But I think that, when we talk about SEO, that's what I hear is like, how can I show up more in Google? Because that is the predominant search engine.
Yeah.
And SEO has changed a lot over the years, right? I mean, I think when lawyers started doing it, what was like late 90s, early 2000s, that kind of time frame, it was all about keyword stuffing.
Right.
So it was just, hey, let's put a bunch of these keywords on there and we'll rank.
Yeah.
And that's evolved a lot. Tell us a little bit about the evolution you've seen just in terms of what you've seen at Postali.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right that it was just keyword stuffing for a long time. I mean, if you look back at the earliest law firm websites, it's just walls of text and it's all the keywords, and really didn't even have to make sense from a linguistic perspective. It can just be keywords and it would show up because people didn't really know how to query. Everyone was learning how to use this thing, right? So if you fast forward from then until, let's just say, when SEO really started to hit heavy, which is probably 10 years ago or so, where almost every firm that wanted to generate leads online was like, I need to invest in SEO. There was still a lot of that remnant where people would just say, I'm just going to write a bunch of content and I'm going to either build spammy backlinks or build credible backlinks, just links into the site. Because it was a race for organic results. And I think the reason that SEO has changed so much is when I say organic results, I mean, for a long time you didn't even have maps on a search result page. You just had a string of natural organic listings. And then around that 8 to 10 year mark, the maps start to really become prominent, and they have different ranking factors, different things bring visibility to them, and users really engage with them. So now when we look at a search result page, you have a whole lot of different things to click on. So optimizing a website, it looks very different because you're optimizing for maps. You may have to have a paid strategy, even though like part of your overall search strategy could be, if 60% of the real estate on a search result page is an ad, should we be investing in ads? It's just a thing you have to ask.
Sure. And let's mention that because a lot of people, I use the term organic a lot. I feel like I have a decent understanding of what it means, but a lot of people I talk to in conversation, there's kind of a lot of confusion with that. So let's talk about it from the standpoint of what a searcher sees when they search for a personal injury lawyer. And it could be just searching, what do I do after a car accident, or actually searching, for a branded keyword, or it could be just searching for a substantive keyword like personal injury lawyer. So I search, what comes up? We've got LSAs, right?
Yeah, well, and I'll even break this down further, because if you search something like personal injury lawyer, that's a very broad categorical search, and you're going to get a search page layout that looks one way. If you search something that's a little bit more what we would call long tail, like what do I do after a car accident, you're going to get a different search result page. That's a evolution of Google, right?
Google's getting smarter.
They're getting smarter.
They want to
with intent.
be the best search engine. You've got to give information that's helpful to the searcher. So the old days of just putting a bunch of keywords doesn't work.
Right.
You've got to now optimize for all these different areas. So what the searcher sees based on whether it's long tail keyword, and long tail keyword, as I understand it, is that's not searching Atlanta personal injury attorney or Marietta personal injury attorney. It's who pays my medical bills after a car accident.
Yeah.
Right?
The true definition of it is supposed to be, if you look at a curve, anything that's not in the 80% of common search terms becomes long tail. It's in the long tail of the curve that's almost always unique, or Google doesn't see it very often. But to get back to your question of like, what does a person see? They see right now typically LSAs, so local service ads. 2 or 3 of them at the top of the page. And these are categorical.
Okay.
People who want to show up there basically say, I'm a personal injury lawyer. And then you'll have 8 to 10 different boxes you can check of subcategories. And Google's kind of taking a bunch of different terms and saying, well, they all map to these areas. So those are front and center. Those have actually they're great in a lot of ways, and they're terrible in a lot of ways. We'll come back to that. We'll kind of show what that...
I know why they're terrible, because I experienced it.
Yes. So there's local service ads, then there's pay-per-click. So what most people think about is Google ads, pay-per-click, and 1 or 2 of those. Then you typically get the maps. So you get a map with, we've seen a lot more sponsored listings in there. So we actually see 4 more recently.
So sponsored. So now you've got LSA with local service ad. That's paid search. And that's not pay per click. That's pay per lead, right?
Correct.
So you only have to pay for a lead that contacts you.
Yep.
Then you come down, you've got pay per click.
Yep.
Then you've got your map listing, and you've got 3 results that show up based on a variety of factors. But then you have 1 sponsored ad, and that's a paid ad?
It's a paid ad, and that's actually evolved too. For a long time, that was done through a local ad extension of pay-per-click. Now that's actually a function of LSAs. So the LSAs are actually pulling in. So when you click on that, you see the LSA criteria.
So to show up in that sponsorship, you've got to be playing the LSA game.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so then below the maps, that's where you have the organic listings.
Yeah, that's what we would call true organic results. And even those are a mixed bag now.
And you're going to have directory listings.
Right.
You're going to have these other things. So that is, SEO is the map listing and the organic results. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
And when we hear, a lot of lawyers hear about local search. So when they're looking for an agency, they'll talk about local search. Is that just the maps, or is it both maps and organic? Because organic has a local component too. It's serving results based on the proximity of the searcher to the firm, right?
Yeah, the semantics of all of this is, you could probably ask 10 people and get 8 different answers. But by and large, when people say local search, they're thinking just the maps.
Okay.
What Google now calls the local finder, because even maps alone is a different term. Maps is an app. Maps is a website that Google has. Like, we call it Maps, but Google has moved to kind of call it the local finder.
So lawyers get solicited by a lot of vendors for SEO. And we'll talk about paid search in a minute, because that's very different.
Yeah.
SEO, and I'll just talk a little bit about my background. I think for anybody that listened to the first episode, I talked a little bit about this. I bounced around to a lot of different agencies, in large part because I was in survival mode, and you're trying to find somebody that can get you those results. That's not a good game to play with SEO. I tell people it's, if you think of search, think of SEO as like farming and PPC as like hunting. And if you don't give the stuff time to grow, it's not going to grow. And so I bounced around to several different agencies. Ultimately, we've been with Postali now for almost 3 years, which, I think in talking to a lot of colleagues, they're, the most they stay with anybody is like 12 months. What are some of the problems that can exist if a lawyer is bouncing around from different agencies? Because again, there's so much out there. Like, I went to Lanier Trial Academy recently, and there was like 10 SEO vendors there sponsoring it, and they had tables set up, and we see these things, and we see other people that we think might be having results, and we switch. What are the problems that can create?
I would say there are a lot.
And you can use ours as an example, because that presented some challenges to you all.
Yeah, it did. And I think that's really where the biggest thing is. You're picking up something that has already been worked on, and it has equity, good or bad, in some way. And not just equity, it also has structure, and it has been indexed by Google over a period of time. So for a long time, our stance, and we actually changed this about 5 years ago, but for a long time, our stance was, we will not inherit anything.
Interesting.
We have to build everything on a clean slate.
I'm glad you changed that.
Yeah, yep. And in some ways it's good, and in some ways it's bad. It's our actual decision to do that had a lot to do with what we would call a algorithmic penalty that we thought a lot of websites were having. So for example, if you worked with an agency that was known to kind of do some sketchy backlinking strategies or structural things that don't really align with what Google wants, there would just be this huge fall from grace that they would have. And they would never recover, regardless of what work was done. And we just chalked that up to, well, the algorithm is penalizing it because there's something baked in. So we didn't want that history. We wouldn't even redirect the domain. We would let the domain sit with like a parking page basically and say, the new website is over here, but we wouldn't allow that link to have any equity pass through. We tried to disconnect those things as much as possible. Around that time though, the reason we changed that strategy is that Google said that they were going to be much more lenient with disavowing links or breaking those historical link relationships. Is that 100% true? We don't see it 100%. I think that there's still a really strong case, but you've gone through this enough to know that like if somebody says nothing you have is valuable, you have to, all that sunk cost and we have to completely start over. That's a hard pill to swallow.
It's very hard. Yeah.
So that is, and we fought that and we lost a lot of deals because of it. But on the flip side, let's fast forward to now we will inherit a site and we'll restructure it. And, we've talked about the analogy of if something is already built and you don't know what's behind the walls of a house, for example, and you start adding things on or you start trying to make modifications, you can try to see all of it, but you don't know how Google has understood that site before entirely. You don't know what negative things have been done historically, maybe not even by the previous vendor, but by 2 or 3 vendors ago. Because the archaeology of that is really hard to do and it's really time consuming. So that is the biggest thing. An agency inherits all of the flaws and opportunity of a site. And sometimes it's really hard to know how much to cut out versus how much to go forward with. And it's an art as much of it as a science. And that's what I think when firms go from agency to agency year over year, unless they're rebuilding, and even then, if they're rebuilding, then they probably even need more runway because they need more time and equity to be built in. So it is, I'll say all this knowing that it's hard to find a good SEO agency, one that you feel like has your best interest in mind. And I understand why people jump, but it puts the next person in line in a disadvantaged situation.
So I'm a personal injury lawyer, and a lot of people that listen to this podcast are also personal injury lawyers. Would you say that personal injury is the most competitive practice area in the legal landscape?
Oh, by far.
Yeah.
By far.
And can you think of any other area just in SEO in general? I mean, even outside of legal, that is close to being as competitive as personal injury SEO is? Not really. And we use price per click in ads as kind of a barometer for how competitive something is because, in an economic model, if it's really expensive in ads, you would move back and forth between SEO and ads. And if ads were cheap enough, people would really push there. So that the price of a click is pretty much going to show you how competitive something is for SEO. And, we see markets where people are paying, this is a whole other thing we can talk about with ads as far as like bid rates and inexperienced people doing ads and then driving bid rates up for everybody else. But like people are willing to pay $700, $800, $900 a click that just is a click. Yeah. And we don't see that in any other legal vertical, and I've worked in other verticals that are not even close. It's just the value of the cases can be so high, and firms that are well capitalized. And it's the fact that they're taking the cases on the contingency fee, right?
Yeah.
So, I do think there's, in terms of what I've seen in the Atlanta area. So our office is in Marietta, but from what I've seen across the country, Atlanta's a pretty competitive market. I mean, would you rank it as like a top 5?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
So you've had your work cut out for you with us. So for anybody listening to this, you cannot use Postali in Atlanta because we have exclusivity. I hope we do. I hope we pay you guys enough for that.
Yeah, that's true.
If not, we need to talk after.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the mistakes that I see a lot of lawyers make is, one, we talked about they don't stay with SEO agency long enough. Do you have any kind of recommendation for how long lawyers should give it to work? Because I know a lot of people say a year. I actually think it's longer than that to really get the full picture. I mean, I think in my first podcast, I talked about 2 years to kind of know and have a good idea. What do you tell lawyers?
It's a function of market competitiveness. So like, I think you're right in thinking about this market. You definitely need more than a year, especially like you guys had an office relocation. You had a lot of moving parts on top of just what needed to be done structurally to the site. But yeah, if you're if you're an injury lawyer in LA or New York or Chicago or something like that, I would say 2 years is probably the minimum. Now, that's not without some type of leading indicators. I don't want to come out and just say like blindly commit for 2 years. And I don't even think we often ask for annual agreements, but I don't think it's really fair to ask for much beyond that, because you will start to see performance changes even if you're not feeling it in your business yet. But small markets, we work with a family lawyer in a suburban or a small metro. They should really see results in 4 to 6 months.
Right. A probate attorney in Valdosta, Georgia, for example.
Yeah.
It's small town, not as competitive practice area. Or even, a personal injury lawyer in one of those small, cities, I think, Columbus, Georgia, Macon, Georgia, Augusta. Yeah. Those places, I do think there's an opportunity there. But, one of the things that I tell lawyers, because a lot of lawyers that will go out and start a firm will ask me for advice on things. And, what I tell them is don't even try to play in the SEO game, at least not now. Yeah. Because you're just throwing your money away. Yep. Like there's so many other things you could put your money in. In terms of the amount of money that it costs, and this is the big question I hear from a lot of lawyers. They're always like, well, how much money should I spend? And the way they typically set their budget is by asking other lawyers what they spend. So what do you spend over here? What do you spend? And do you have, well, I guess first let me ask you this. How do you come up with a budget? Yeah. I imagine you're looking at, the history of the website, the market, and those kinds of things. But tell me what goes into that, and then what you generally recommend to lawyers. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's, it can be challenging, the nuances of it. But the one thing that I would say is you do have to look at all of your primary competitor sites. If you're trying to perform an SEO, you basically have to say, we need to be better than one of these top 10 guys. So we have to think about what that roadmap looks like, of how do we get the site content, the user experience, all the technical pieces, plus the links to catch one of these top 10 guys, because otherwise you're not displacing anybody. That's one of the terrible things about SEO is it is a displacement game. They're not adding more.
It's a zero-sum game. Right?
Yeah, right.
I will say, in terms of proximity to the searcher, that's helped some, right? Yeah. By serving, But this is the thing that I tell people, though, when they're talking about the budget, is, you're not going to compete with some of these players. Yeah. Now, for us, we're in Marietta, which is just outside of Atlanta, and part of the reason when we were looking at a building to buy was we got a great deal on the building, but it was, hey, maybe this is an opportunity for us to kind of move out of Atlanta a little bit, to be in, a little bit of a less competitive area. Yeah. Still competitive here, though.
It is.
And we still,
it is.
And I think y'all have seen that and running into that.
And we're seeing more and more, this is a sprawling area, but we see more and more downtown metro firms move into the suburbs, and then they create kind of these like almost as competitive spaces as the downtown, because they're getting satellite offices there and things like that. And I think more to your point around the price, the thing that is always tricky to answer this is like, we're an agency that we have in-house employees, and we do very little through any type of AI or things like that. So I have to think about, when we price something out, how many hours of work do we need to produce something? And that's very different, I think, than a lot of agencies think about things. I think they think about, and we'll do this too. We'll benchmark, like, okay, what worked over there? How many resources do we need? But I think there's just a value extraction game that a lot of SEO companies try to say, of like, what do we think we can get? We're just going to get as much as we can. Whereas we actually kind of take a back-end analysis of like, I think we're going to need 110 hours a month, for example, between content and design. We'll allocate those things out. So I would encourage people to kind of ask the vendors that they're considering, like, what is their pricing model based around? Like, can they explain it? Can they articulate it? Because it is time that has to go into content, link building, user experience, technical fixes, and then strategy. Those are the things that make up SEO, and how are you going to allocate those things through? And I think some firms just go, small agencies can do that with 1 or 2 people. When we were really small, we did this with 1 or 2 people, but as you grow, you have more specialists, you have more people that need resources and time. Sure. So that's hopefully that answers your question.
No, it does. And I think what I've seen, from different agencies that we've talked to over the years is they just say like, they just throw out a number. Hey, we're going to need $20,000 or $25,000. And I think actually when we approached Darl, like we suggested, hey, we want to spend a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And you were like, well, I actually don't think you need to spend a whole bunch of money right now. And so you kind of talked us back and we're like, hey, let's spend a little bit less. And we certainly appreciated that. Honestly, you don't always get that with a lot of agencies.
Yeah.
It's, hey, let's try and get this money. But in terms of budget, and I know you mentioned there's a lot of factors that go into it, but let's just talk kind of rough numbers on what you see clients needing to pay to be competitive. So let's start with major metro, Atlanta, Chicago, LA, like just really big cities, super competitive. In personal injury, what are you seeing lawyers need to spend to get an ROI?
This is a wide range. It depends a lot on number of office locations and what's being done in-house too. I think those are two things that can really sway this. But I would say minimum of 10 kind of hands down in a really big metro. And I think that is probably only in very rare situations where everything's been highly controlled and you maybe already have some good momentum. It's not a ground up kind of build because you'll just never get there with that amount of budget from the start. I would say high end, you're probably looking at 45 to 60.
And just for people listening, it's $45,000 to $60,000 a month, right? On the high end, low end, $10,000 a month. Yeah. But if you can stomach it, the rewards are great. I mean,
yes, if you're one of the few that are in there, and I think that this is something that I think you and I have kind of touched on this in the past, but I do like to bring this up is that at that higher end range, it starts to be kind of head scratching of like why do I want to pay somebody outside versus doing this in house? It starts to get into that question of like you guys have some dedicated marketing people in
and they're awesome
and they're great and. None of them
Happy birthday,
none of them are staring at us right now. But I do think that's when you start to approach really even like that maybe 30 range, starting to think about bringing some of that in-house. I think the problem with doing it in-house too soon is that you don't have the diversity of skill set that you do in an agency. We essentially have to have like 5 different departments. But when we start to say, $50,000 a month in SEO, it's like, well, that's if
$600,000. Yeah. I mean, you think of the marketing team you could build out for $600,000.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me, and I've always thought this about my business. I mean, we've grown a lot. We have soon to be 7 attorneys. Yeah. I think that's right, including myself. I can never keep it straight. I have to go through the offices in my head. Yep. But I think regardless of what happens in the future for us, we're always going to need an outside agency because I think there's a level of expertise because of the specialization that an agency can have people focused on those areas. And then you just have so many changes. Yeah. I mean, Google's changing constantly. That was the next thing I wanted to ask you about. One of the reservations that I've had at times is, what if we spend all this money and then Google just changes the algorithm? Boom. Yep. The algorithm changes constantly, by the way. Yep. But like, what if you just have some dramatic change and then everything that you've spent? Because if you tell somebody, hey, you can spend $360,000 a year, $30,000 a month, and if you do the math and you're thinking, hey, we'll get an ROI and this is what it'll be, but things could suddenly change, rugs pulled out from under us. What do you tell people who have that concern?
It's a very real concern, and we've seen it happen. That's a lot of sites that we inherit that happened. People were making 15 to 20 times their investment, and then everything just went to zero. I think the first thing that I say is that nobody should invest in it.
It went to zero before you inherited them.
Correct. Yeah, good clarification.
Yes, we got to be clear on the language here.
Yeah.
Jim did not make them go to zero.
Yes, we picked it up at zero after it had fallen.
They came to you because it went to zero.
Yeah. I think the first thing that I would ask is, if you're spending that amount of money in SEO, where else are you diversified? Like I would think about this like any other type of financial decision. Like, 100%. Don't put all of your investments in
100%.
The S&P, diversify it. So make sure you have that before you start to scale anything up. If you see that SEO is actually like you're driving like your largest ROI and you have all your other pieces in place, then go nuts. Continue to invest until that ROI diminishes, or whatever marketing channel that is that does that for you. Just don't have that be your only thing.
Yeah, I think for us, and I can talk a little bit about my experiences, I've always told my in-house marketing people that I'd love to have a 3-way split on cases. A third from SEO / internet marketing.
Yep.
A third from client referrals and a third from attorney referrals. And there's definitely been times where our focus and our allocation of resources has been a little tilted in one direction or the other, and you can kind of see that in the leads. I think during COVID, for example, our attorney leads fell off. There's a variety of reasons behind that, but you're also not getting out as much. You're not interacting with people and having that face time to build relationships. But I always recommend that people absolutely diversify. And I do think of it as like an investment strategy. You want to own real estate and stocks and bonds and other things so that you're not totally tied to one source. But one of the recommendations that I always have for lawyers too is to take ownership of their marketing. I see so many law firms that, just because of the way they're structured, maybe they're very top heavy with lawyers or staff. They don't have the administrative people. They don't have either a marketing person or a marketing team. And they just throw money at some outside agency, which one is not diversifying at all. But two, you're not really getting adequate collaboration and, in terms of what needs to be done to work on the branding side of things and to diversify. And so that's one of the things that we've really tried to focus on over the last year or so is to build our in-house marketing team. We now have a marketing director, we have somebody in charge of digital marketing, and we have a video content creator. And that's been huge for us because when we've worked with outside people, for example, on social media, you don't get the same kind of character in the posts. It seems very cookie cutter. You don't have that branding. With the videos, you've got to use an outsourced person. This depends on when they're available. They cost a lot of money. What do you tell other lawyers or law firms that are thinking about hiring somebody in-house to work on their marketing?
I want to say one thing about the last thing you said, and then we'll jump into that, which is I think SEO in part gets a bad rap because it is exactly what you said. Firms want to be able to throw something over to an outside vendor and know that they can forget about it, and they think of SEO as that thing. And I think that's a trap because it is a hands-on piece. But as far as, can you restate the question?
Sure. And this fits nicely, right? So you're talking about you can't just throw money at an SEO agency, which I see people all the time do. I mean, lawyers are the kings of that. And I think personal injury lawyers in particular, we see somebody else doing something. And I say we, not me, but like the collective we as an industry. And there's this thought that, well, if they're doing it, I need to do it. And you can almost sell anything to a personal injury lawyer. Like if somebody else is doing it, they want to do it. And I think the mistake that I've seen, and it sounds like you've seen it too, is lawyers say, let me just write a big check to my SEO agency and set it and forget it. You can't really do that. Right. So what do you recommend about, the time on when a lawyer or law firm should hire somebody in-house to work on their marketing? Not only the in-house marketing, to be kind of that point person for the SEO agency.
This is probably a year or two before you think you need it.
Sure.
We were talking a little bit just about like business structure, and at Postali, we use the EOS model.
And for people that don't know, that's Entrepreneur's Operating System.
And it's widely used, and everyone that uses it kind of uses a variation of it. But I think the reason I bring it up is that it tends to break things down into business functions that are really simplified. And when you think about them, you start to go, oh, I wonder why I'm doing things that way. So in this case, when you think about a law firm, sales and marketing, sales being intake, marketing being all the other pieces of bringing in business, operations, doing the legal work, and then finance. So most firms spend almost all of their resources in the middle funnel, operations, for a really long time. Typically because the lead attorney is either really good at bringing in business, and the finance piece, maybe they're good at that too, or they've just outsourced that to an accountant.
Sure.
But they have this like ghost town over on the sales and marketing side. They are reluctant to hire an intake person. They're reluctant to hire an in-house marketer. And I think the reason is that they're so used to the operations of a firm, they understand the nuances of like why they need all of those people. They've done that work, so they know like, oh, I can't give that to this person because that's not their exact skill set, or there's more nuance around that. But they don't often see that in marketing, where they just say, oh, I have a marketer, they can do everything. And in the meantime, that marketer is going, I need 6 people. I'm not an ads expert. I'm a strategist. I'm not an ads expert. I'm not an SEO expert. I'm not all these things. But that's your captain of that side. So from a timing perspective, there's probably some magic formula. But I think if you're getting into the range of like 3 attorneys, depending on revenue, you probably need to be thinking about somebody who's really owning the in-house marketing and either managing vendors or doing some execution, depending on what that really looks like.
I have an interesting take on that because I kind of fell into that trap too of focusing so much on the legal work and focusing on attorneys and paralegals. And I think it has to do with measurement. And it's easy to measure, okay, I have an attorney working on this case and a paralegal. This is what I'm paying them, and this is what their cases produced. Because we are, as personal injury lawyers, contingency fee lawyers, we can't bill people out. And so we're very much focused on what is that's coming in versus what does it cost to work on it. And that's an easy thing to measure. And I think lawyers get in that trap of focusing on, okay, well, this team of attorney and paralegal, let's say I paid them, together, $350,000 this year. They brought in $1 million. That's the profit, right? Yeah. You can't measure that directly with a marketing person. Yeah. You can't measure that directly with an intake specialist. You can't measure it directly with an office manager.
Yeah.
But you know that there is a cost to it. And what I advise people to do is think about not in terms of what can you measure in the data. Think in terms of, one, what does it cost an hour of your time as the business owner to work on it? What is an hour of your time worth? And whatever you set it at, look at it and say, okay, if I'm worth, X amount an hour, if I can pay somebody $25 an hour to do it, I can then spend my time and energy on these higher value tasks. The other thing that I encourage people to look at is, try to think about what you could be losing or gaining by having or not having that person. So we went through this recently with whether to hire an intake person. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job for our firm. I mean, we don't have so many leads that we need somebody 40 hours a week just processing it. But if you look at what's the cost to the firm, it comes in 2 ways. One, lower conversion rate because you don't have that person right there ready to jump on the lead and process it. And then number 2 is there's a carryover effect into it's disrupting the workflow of the attorneys and paralegals. So you're losing money up from that standpoint too. And when I just looked at it and said, hey, I can pay an intake person, X amount a year, and I forget what it was, maybe $40,000 a year, $45,000 a year. It's like, wow, that's, if you look at, okay, what's my conversion rate going to improve to? What's the just kind of peace of mind of the attorneys not having to jump on those things? It's invaluable. I think from a marketing standpoint, this is where I hear lawyers all the time ask me about things, and this is where we'll get into paid ads. Paid ads is probably the easiest thing to measure because it's, hey, we paid for this ad, we got this case, and you can measure it month to month. You can't measure social media per se. I mean, you can maybe measure social media ads, but what did you have to spend on branding and social media to get to that point? Yeah. With LSA, and let's talk about LSA and PPC, and then I want to talk some more about other sources like social media, LinkedIn in particular. Yeah. Because I think my experience with LinkedIn is a good example of the mistake I hear lawyers make in thinking you need a direct ROI to make something worth it. Yeah. So LSA has been around, 4 years, 3 years, 4 years, somewhere around there?
Yeah, I think it's longer than that, but not for attorneys. I think they rolled out in October.
So for people that don't know, it's super volatile. There are people who were getting tons of cases when it first launched, and then they just fell off the face of the earth. And nobody knows. And when I hear people talking about this on podcasts and webinars, nobody really knows why. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about LSAs and what your experience with them is.
Yeah, same as yours. I mean, we, especially for all of our attorneys who are in direct to consumer, personal injury, criminal defense, family law, we'll essentially take all the LSA leads that we can get for all of those because we look at what the comparative is with PPC and the ROI is great. And it's great for all of those areas. As long as the firms have a good intake process, it is probably the best way to spend money right now. So that's the nice thing is if
LSA, PPC, or both?
LSA, yeah, LSA. PPC is a whole another animal, but happy to dive down that as well. But LSA is because when you think about a cost per call of even $200, when you're going to spend $200 on a click, you're going to take the LSAs every day, and it's front and center. the real thing to talk about here is like, why are some firms really visible and other firms not? Because in a PPC scenario, it's auction based. You can pay your way to the top. There's a little bit of a quality score element there, but it's mostly just like if you're willing to pay, you're going to show up. In LSAs, you can put your budget of $1 million a month, and they may not show your ad at all. And Google has been very opaque with this, where they're basically saying it's proximity, it's reviews. There are a number of ranking factors, and we've experimented with a lot of things, and some things work, and we can kind of draw a straight line and say, okay, we changed that, and that was effective. But in a market like Atlanta or New York City, sometimes nothing works. You know, we're in this scenario with you right now where we've had to do a lot of different changes, and we're actually running some experiments on, are there things that are actually ranking factors here that Google has not disclosed? And I think that's kind of where we're at. There's always the kind of cynic in me that will say, we've had issues like historically, well, I shouldn't say, like you guys have had issues historically with your Google business profile.
Yep.
For whatever reason.
And I'll just mention briefly what happened with our Google business profile. And nobody really knows why.
Yeah.
One time, I think it was late 2019, it just disappeared.
Yeah.
And we recognized it and, let Google know, hey, where'd our page go?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, sorry about that. We'll put it back. And all of a sudden it showed back up. The reviews populated. And, we weren't doing anything, improper.
Yep.
When I say we, I mean, we were almost using exclusively an agency at that time.
Yep.
I don't even think I had a marketing director at that time. Or if I did, she'd only been with me for a very short period of time. But nobody really knew why our page disappeared. Yeah. And Google wouldn't tell us. And we had y'all look at it. We had our agency at the time look at it. We had a third party look at it. And they were like, I don't know, what happened? And so there's been some wonky things that have gone on with our site since then. But anyway, that's what I wanted to clarify. That
and
we weren't running totally black hat SEO on our website.
No, and I just want to bring that up because there is an association between a business profile and local service ads. I mean, on the back end, that's how they associate. That's how Google connects them together. They take the business profile and the criteria there, and they associate it to the ads account. And then you can see it through your actual ads manager. But so there is this relationship that exists. But to the broader point, you can't force visibility with LSAs. Right now in the Atlanta metro, there are probably 80 firms that want to be in those top 2. And Google is somehow shuffling them through based on the factors that they're saying and the factors that they're not saying. And then is there also some other like penalization thing happening? And I think that's the piece that it's rare, but we have seen in a few markets, another client, I won't disclose who we have. We have another client that had a very similar kind of questionable past with their Google business profile. And when we took it over, we changed the business name to be more accurate with what the actual business filing was, and it got suspended immediately, which is a very rare thing. We've had to start and stop their LSAs, basically like continue to restart them, and we had to do it about 6 times before it actually took. And I don't know what that, honestly, I don't know what that does on the back end.
Well, I'll tell you, when we started with LSAs, and I can't remember if this was before or after our Google business profile page disappeared briefly. We actually got a decent amount of traction with it. I think one of the things that we were doing, and I think this was a mistake in retrospect, was when something wasn't a qualified lead, Google said, well, of course, you can ask for a refund. You know, it wasn't qualified, you don't have to pay for it. So we were like, okay, well, let's ask for a refund. Google's in the business of making money. And you talk about the cynic. I mean, that's probably a piece is what is your percentage of requesting reimbursement or whatever for a non-qualified lead.
And we know 100% that is a piece. They call it engagement. And engagement means like, are you effectively engaging? So if you have a call with somebody and then you say that it's not a good lead and you say that doesn't work for me, over time, you're essentially whittling down the types of terms and users that Google wants to send to you. So that it's very possible. And that's why we do the restart is like, we want to try to disconnect all of that previous history. Because I remember talking with folks and I was like, maybe don't.
Just play it safe. Just don't ask for the refund.
Maybe don't. Like we've gone as far, and this is for anybody who's running LSAs. Like, if you're tapped in enough with the numbers, you don't actually need to dispute anything. Like, it's going to pay off. Don't
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do not dispute leads unless they are egregiously out of practice area. There is a level of refinement that you want to give to Google to say, like, I'm not a divorce attorney, and this person called for divorce. So, like, Google, whatever that query was, don't send that to me anymore.
Yeah.
But
we had a recent experience, and I think maybe we turned LSA ads on for our medical malpractice area, and we got like 20 leads in like 2 days, and it was crazy. I mean, none of them were qualified leads in terms of, well, they weren't cases. They weren't valid cases, and that's not unusual with medical malpractice, but these ones were especially not like qualified leads. I mean, these weren't even like close calls. And the only thing I can think of is maybe Google thinks that we're a medical malpractice firm almost exclusively, or thinks that we're heavy on that. And we do handle medical malpractice cases, but we went back and I don't think we asked for a refund, but we said, let's just shut that part off because it wasn't worth it to be having to fill those leads. And again, you talk about that being a mystery, which gets to the PPC, which is less of a mystery, right? Tell us a little bit about how PPC works and what y'all do with PPC.
Yeah. They're trying to make it more of a mystery so that everything is becoming a little bit more black box with Google. So with PPC, so when we talk about clients of like what marketing channels should you invest in, we talk about PPC mostly when people are in areas that are not extremely competitive or areas that they want to kind of niche down into. You can't niche down in LSAs. They have subcategories, but you can't be really prescriptive with what you want to show up for. Google's still going to categorize search terms. So PPC, if you have a niche that you want to drill into, you can get really specific, because the way that works is, one, it's auction based. You tell Google what key terms you want to show up for. And even that is a complicated piece because there are different match types. You can say, I want to show up for car accident lawyer as an exact match, and Google will only show you for that.
And that's going to be very expensive.
It's going to be very expensive. And they're also not going to, it's called exact, but they're also going to give you close variant matches, which can sometimes be
car wreck lawyer, car wreck attorney, things like that.
Yeah. On a good day. On a bad day, they'll associate a brand with that. So let's just say there's a big advertiser that they associate with auto accidents. They might show you for Montlick or John Foy.
And so it used to be, and this was actually a subject of a legal case in Atlanta, where one of the advertising firms was bidding on the other firm's name, and it created a lot of problems. That used to be the case, that that was the only way you would show up, right? Like if somebody searched Montlick or Morgan & Morgan, the only way the champion firm would show up is if I was literally bidding on their name.
Right.
Now, Google's getting, again, so complex with how they're looking at this. They're looking at searcher intent. Well, if they're searching for Morgan & Morgan, they must be searching for a personal injury lawyer. So I'm going to serve this other firm's ad.
Yes.
Interestingly, you may not know this, but Morgan & Morgan likes to send out cease and desist letters to a lot of law firms when their ads show up.
Yeah.
And will say that they're violating something, which they're not. But they'll also ask them to put them as, is it a negative keyword?
Yeah.
So that you won't do it and threaten them with legal action or whatever. We've never gotten one of those letters, but I know other colleagues of mine have. I will not talk anymore about Morgan & Morgan. I don't want to get in trouble.
And that is like not specifically for them, but that is a thing where I see a lot of firm money wasted by not putting the right negative terms in. Because if an agency, especially if an agency isn't really versed in legal PPC, like if you just hire a local marketing company to do PPC, they're not going to understand the nuances of these types of things, and you're going to be bidding on a lot of competitor terms that you might not even be aware of. That you may not want. And if you're an attorney and you're just like, suddenly we've had an uptick in people calling for attorneys that don't actually work here, that's probably what's happening. If you're running PPC, you probably have unmanaged negative terms that are coming in. That's a in the weeds thing. But to kind of get back to the standard thing is, you've got your exact match, you have phrase match. So like if you want to show up for car accident lawyer and then something appended at the beginning or the end, you would say, I'll bid it on a phrase that includes this. That gets a little wild. You really need a ton of negatives for that to not go off the rails. And then Google has a complete Wild West version, which is broad match. And broad match is where they basically say, you give them a category and they're like, we'll figure it out for you. This is what they advise. If you're a novice to ads, like if you're a lawyer and you want to run your own ads and you go into Google, they're going to basically push you towards smart campaigns or broad match campaigns, because their experts are going to say it's easier to manage if you run the campaigns broadly and let the algorithm figure out what's working for you. The problem is you'll never have enough money to see it to the end.
Right,
Because
it'll spend your entire budget.
It'll spend your whole budget. So you can't go into it like that. I would say that's my biggest advice for PPC is market to market dependent. It doesn't work for everybody. The markets can drive people out. Sometimes the ROI doesn't make sense. And sometimes people who are really firms that are really capitalized will intentionally drive competitors out.
Yes, we're not naming any names here.
It just happens, right?
In talking about PPC, I've heard a lot of people ask this question of, does spending money on ads affect their either local maps rankings or SEO?
Yep.
Talk about LSAs separate in terms of whether it affects LSAs. And Google's official position is no, it doesn't.
Right.
What's your experience?
We've never been able to correlate ranking changes with PPC spend, but we have been able to correlate click-through rate a little bit. So having ads up will give you about 10% more clicks, all things being equal, just because you're visible. So you kind of get this subconscious look of, if you're in the ads and they see your name and then you also rank, let's say position 2, you've kind of made an association already with that user as they're just skimming. So we have seen about a 10% boost on that. It varies, but as far as actual ranking position correlated with when are you running ads and when are you spending money and all that, we've never seen it. So I'm inclined to believe Google for the most part.
What about LSAs? Have you seen PPC spends affect LSA visibility?
No, I haven't seen that either. Those actually seem really unrelated, because I can think of a number of clients that we have that don't spend on PPC at all and have extreme LSA visibility. More of the correlation is really good SEO and GBP profiles are a little bit more correlated. So I think there's almost more of an SEO just authority piece with LSAs versus like the relation between LSAs and PPC.
When OpenAI and ChatGPT launched, it was like the world is changing, and I think there's like the tech hype cycle. What is it? It like goes up and then it just falls down and then stays down for years. And I kind of got that sense, is like all of a sudden all these people were going to be unemployed, and it was crazy. Like lawyers aren't going to have jobs. It's like, this is nonsense. And so then Google, it appears, wanted to kind of get in on the rush to that, and had been working on developing an AI type search module for a while, but maybe rushed it out pretty quickly when ChatGPT came out. Tell us a little bit about that, what it's called, and how you see that being utilized in the future.
Yeah, so it's the Search Generation Experience, so SGE. It's currently in Google Lab. So if people have access to the Google Lab through their Google account, then you could actually experience this right now. It's hard to predict where it's going to go, because it's very much in beta right now. Like right now, that experience, they've essentially repackaged the search experience to make it a little bit more chat friendly. So you can see, like if I have a browser up with current SERP results and the new stuff, you can just see where they remapped things. They just made it a little bit nicer to type it in. You can kind of feel like you're generating your own journey here in a different way than like, a search engine feels very static. So they found a way to make it more dynamic. But that's this beta version 1. I think where Google really wants to go, and we'll see where this goes, is like if you look at the evolution of like what Google has tried to do from a content display, they want to keep people in their search page. They really don't like click-throughs. So when you type something into this generative display, they're trying to pull even more information from websites without giving them credit and then having that displayed. So if you do a long tail query of a FAQ right now, not thinking about the AI piece of it, you're going to get a featured snippet, just like an answer to your question. It's going to be highlighted and it's going to have a little link to the source of that information. In this new experience, they've summarized information. They haven't even linked to a direct source. So I think that they're trying to really just continue to go down that path of like keeping users on the page, and then they will figure out how to monetize that, because I think they do want what's best for a user as long as it's financially viable for them to do what
Right.
they're doing. So
This all comes back to Google making money. They're a business,
Yeah.
publicly traded company.
Yes.
Their number one goal is to make
Yes.
as much money as possible.
and they're going to take your content and compile it. And I guess a few predictions just for fun. We can look back at this and figure out how wrong I was.
Sure, we'll have you on in a year and
Yeah.
see if you were right or.
Yep. It's going to be more important than ever to be top 3 or 4 in the search results if this version goes forward, because they're going to push people into that generation experience and away from the standard experience. If it's this version, I hope that they make it much more dynamic to where if you have something broad, like who should I hire for my personal injury case, it'll give you kind of what you're typically seeing now. But if you say something more precise, like I want someone with like the best winning percentage or something that could actually be empirically proven, I'd love to see them do that, where users can really go down a path and Google can start to gather more information that they're not getting now. Because I think that's what people really want down this AI path, is they want to be able to have decisions answered for them with
Sure.
their prompt engineering.
It sounds like reviews are going to be important.
Reviews are super important. We're even seeing now that like it'll say something like, one person thinks this firm is professional, one person thinks
Sure.
this firm did that. So reviews will continue to be important.
So let me think here as we wrap up what I want to ask about that. Oh, given these changes, do you still recommend that lawyers invest in SEO? Understanding, obviously, you're an SEO agency, right?
Yeah.
So you've got some skin in the game here.
Yeah.
But there's other things that y'all do, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and y'all also started being a direct mail
Yeah.
marketing agency. So what is your thought? I mean, your agency's evolved over the years. Do you still recommend that lawyers, let's talk about personal injury lawyers in particular, invest in SEO?
Generally, yes, but I would say like we take a very fiduciary slant to everything that we recommend, and I think that attorneys broadly, injury lawyers especially, should invest in building the equity of their website, because it is something that they own and it's something that matters to potential clients. And I do believe that it will continue to matter to search engines, at least in the foreseeable future, the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to look really different. It might be skinned different, the experience will be different, but I do think that people should invest in growing the authority of their website. Whether that looks like SEO does today, I don't know. But it's one of few things you can truly own as an attorney digitally.
Sure.
You don't own your ads. Everything else is on a platform, Final and Avvo and all those places. So making that something that has value in a virtual world still feels like it's really important over the long run.
So before we sign off, there's going to be personal injury attorneys listening to this. Tell us what would your advice be to them on when they're getting contacted by these SEO agencies, or they're considering either switching or starting. What should they look for in an SEO agency?
I think that they just need to look for a track record of success, both long-term and short-term. I would also highly encourage them to make sure that the tactics that are going to be deployed can be clearly articulated and it's not just buzzwords. Like, I've had a lot of conversations with attorneys who are like, they don't want to know what we're going to do. They just want it to work. And we've struggled with that because sometimes there are decisions that have to be made. Like, we have to articulate 2 paths that we can go down and we can make a recommendation, but being invested in that. So like, do some homework up front, look at a track record of success, have a budget in mind. This is one thing that I think can go good or bad, but when you don't have a budget in mind, you are going to put yourself at risk for people who are not looking out for your best interests, and they're just going to try to maximize that. Because there's a misconception about SEO is that SEO can be done at any budget. Like, a personal injury lawyer in Atlanta can come to an agency and say, I want you to do $1,500 worth of SEO work every month. And if an agency is competent, they could say, yeah, we can do some work for you. I don't know how much that's really going to move the needle, but you should be able to say, okay, well, I just focus on content generation or just focus on this, and maybe we'll grow over time. That should be possible. So knowing a budget makes a ton of sense. because somebody might back you down too. They may say, oh, your market doesn't actually need
Sure.
30K.
You backed us down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we were, and even though we're in a competitive market, I think you looked at our website and, some of the good things that we had. Again, we weren't starting from scratch. We weren't the law firm that, I just hung a shingle, a month ago. It's been going on for a few years. What do you tell lawyers who are talking to an agency that is going to own their content, where the agency owns it?
Does
that still exist, by the way?
I think it does.
Okay.
I think it does. I don't really see, I do actually see one reason why that can't happen. And I think that this goes down to things to ask in an interview with an agency is, what are you paying for and when? I think a lot of times the ownership comes down to like, you actually haven't paid for that work yet. And that's something that we've encountered before. So I think there's kind of like 3 different paths here. There is the lease forever model. FineLaw used to do this. I don't know if they still do, but it was basically like, they're going to produce all this work for you, but if you don't continue to pay them, you're essentially leasing that. Then there's I own everything from the moment we start working together. I as the lawyer own everything. And then there's the model that we've actually had to use a couple times, which is there are different ways to price things. And I think that the pricing transparency conversation gets really murky of if somebody builds you a 100-page website that's custom and you've only paid $10,000 of that upfront fee and the rest of it might be amortized and maybe that's not clearly communicated, who owns it then?
Sure.
Because a lot of agencies recognize that like a firm doesn't want to spend $80,000 on a website, even though that may be what they need. So they spread that cost out. And I think that's where the murkiness comes in. It's like,
Got it.
When do you own it, and be reasonable about owning it when it's paid for, and also be reasonable about what are you getting. Like if an agency is saying, we'll produce 80 pages of content for you for $5,000, you're either getting computer generated content or you're paying for that some other way. It's baked into your monthly, it's baked into something. Like just ask where that's going so that you can have an understanding of like what ownership should you ask for that's reasonable and fair.
Well, Jim, thanks for joining us. This has been a very helpful conversation for me, learning a lot about SEO. I feel like I had a decent foundation, but I've learned a lot today. For anybody listening that wants to check you guys out and find out more about the work you do, where can they find you online? Yeah,
just postali.com. If you have questions for us, want to quote, just generally want to pick our brains about what's going on in the space, we're always happy to chat. So postali.com, and you'll either connect with me or with somebody on our team.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Hope that you'll join us for our next episode next month. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Championing Justice podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.